In divorce, my ex left me with nothing, and I ended up as a waitress at a hotel. Yesterday, I served a billionaire guest. When he reached out his hand, I saw the same birthmark I have on my wrist. Curious, I asked his name. He answered, and I realized it was the same as the baby I lost 30 years ago. The Windsor Hotel doesn't hire women in their 50s to serve in their prestigious restaurant. They prefer pretty young things with bright smiles and unblemished histories. But when your resume includes former Mrs. Jonathan Reeves and your references include some of the wealthiest socialites in the city, exceptions are made. Even when you're 52 with silver threading through your once auburn hair and lines around your eyes that tell stories of both laughter and grief. I'd been working here for 5 years, ever since Jonathan stripped me of everything in our divorce. The irony doesn't escape me that I now serve drinks to the same people who once sat at my dinner table. Most pretend not to recognize me. The few who do offer pitying smiles that burn worse than indifference. Olivia, you're on the VIP section tonight. Diana, the floor manager, informed me as I arrived for my shift. Mr. Morgan is staying in the penthouse. He rarely comes down to dine, but when he does, he expects perfect service and absolute discretion. I nodded, betraying no reaction. Ethan Morgan, tech billionaire, energy innovator, notoriously private. Everyone knew of him, but few knew him. I'd served celebrities and power players before. This was nothing new. The VIP dining area remained empty until precisely 8 o'clock, when he arrived alone without the usual entourage that accompanies the wealthy. Tall, with dark hair swept back from a strong forehead, he moved with quiet confidence. As I approached his table, I noticed he was younger than I expected, early 30s perhaps. "Good evening, sir. May I offer you our wine selection?" I maintained the professional detachment that had become second nature. "Water, please, still, and I'll have the chef's tasting menu." His voice was soft but decisive. I placed the menu on the table. As he reached to take it, his sleeve rode up slightly, revealing a distinctive birthmark on his right wrist, a crescent moon shape, small but unmistakable. My breath caught, identical to mine, identical to the one my baby boy had when he was born prematurely 30 years ago, only to slip away hours later. The wine bottle I was holding nearly slipped from my suddenly numb fingers. I steadied myself, but not before he noticed. "Are you all right?" he asked, genuinely concerned rather than irritated. "Yes, sir. I apologize." I regained my composure, but my heart pounded so violently I was certain he could hear it. Throughout the service, I found myself stealing glances at him. It wasn't just the birthmark. There was something hauntingly familiar in the arch of his brow, the shape of his hands. He had my eyes, not just the color, that peculiar blue-gray that looked almost silver in certain lights, but the shape, the way they crinkled slightly at the corners when he spoke to the sommelier. And there was the chin, Jonathan's chin, with that same slight cleft, the way he held his fork, precise and deliberate, just like Jonathan, no, it was impossible. My son had died. I'd held his tiny body, felt the warmth leave him. I'd buried him in a cemetery across town, in the Reeves family plot that I wasn't even welcome to visit after the divorce. I'd spent years in therapy working through the grief, the trauma, the loss that had created the first crack in my marriage to Jonathan. Yet as the evening progressed, the impossible thought grew stronger. The coincidences piled up. The age would be right, the physical similarities undeniable. And that birthmark. When he finished his meal, I cleared his plate, unable to stop myself from asking the question burning in my throat. "Sir, forgive my impertinence, but may I ask your name?" He looked startled, then amused. "You're serving me dinner, but don't know who I am?" "Your full name, I mean," I clarified, heart hammering. Ethan James Morgan," he replied, curious about my interest. Ethan, the name we had chosen, the name on a tiny gravestone I hadn't seen in years. The world tilted beneath my feet. "Thank you, sir," I managed, turning away before he could see the shock on my face. In the kitchen, I braced myself against the wall, breathing deeply. Coincidence? It had to be. People shared names. Birthmarks weren't unique identifiers. I was projecting, seeing connections where none existed because of unresolved grief. Yet when I returned with his coffee, I noticed how he absently rubbed that birthmark while reading something on his phone, exactly as I did with mine when deep in thought. the same unconscious gesture. "Will there be anything else, Mr. Morgan?" I asked, my voice remarkably steady, despite the chaos inside me. He looked up, studying my face with an intensity that felt like recognition, though that was surely my imagination. "Have we met before? Something about you seems familiar." "I don't believe so, sir," I replied. "I've worked at the Windsor for 5 years. Before that, I was married. My husband was Jonathan Reeves, the attorney." The words tasted bitter, as they always did. His expression changed subtly. "Reeves? From Harrington and Reeves?" "Yes. Do you know him?" I asked, suddenly wary. "By reputation only," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "Thank you for your excellent service tonight, Ms. Reeves. Olivia Reeves." I'd kept Jonathan's name after the divorce, not out of sentimentality, but because changing all my documentation seemed like yet another defeat. As I walked away, I felt his eyes following me. When I glanced back, he was staring at his wrist, then at me, a puzzled expression crossing his face. That night, I couldn't sleep. The impossible thought had taken root and wouldn't let go. I pulled out the small box of mementos I'd managed to keep after the divorce, the few tangible remembrances of my baby, his hospital bracelet, a lock of fine dark hair, the only photograph, grainy and heartbreaking, of his perfect tiny face. And there it was, visible even in the poor quality image, the same crescent moon birthmark on his right wrist, exactly where Ethan Morgan's was, exactly where mine is. Tomorrow, he would check out of the hotel. Tomorrow, I might lose the chance to know the truth. Whatever that truth might be, however impossible it seemed, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I wouldn't survive losing him twice. I arrived at work 3 hours early the next day, my mind racing with possibilities, each more improbable than the last. I'd spent the night alternating between telling myself I was delusional and plotting how to approach Mr. Morgan without sounding like a desperate, possibly unhinged woman. The hotel record showed he wasn't checking out until evening, a small mercy that gave me time. Diana arrived to find me meticulously polishing already spotless glasses, startling her with my uncharacteristic early appearance. "Olivia, everything okay?" Her eyes narrowed with suspicion. In 5 years, I'd never arrived early without being scheduled. "Couldn't sleep," I offered, which wasn't a lie. Thought I'd get a head start. She seemed satisfied with this explanation, if puzzled. "Mr. Morgan requested breakfast in his suite rather than the restaurant. He specifically asked for you to serve." My heart stuttered. "For me? Did he say why?" "No, but the penthouse guests get what they want," she said, handing me the order slip. "And Olivia? Whatever's going on with you today, keep it professional. Mr. Morgan is one of our most important clients." I nodded, taking the service elevator to the penthouse level, my pulse racing as I pushed the room service cart. The weight of the small photograph in my pocket seemed to burn against my thigh. I'd brought it impulsively, though I had no plan for how or even whether to show it. When Ethan Morgan opened the door, he was already dressed in an impeccable charcoal suit, looking like he'd been awake for hours. "Ms. Reeves," he said, stepping aside to let me in. "Thank you for coming up yourself." "Of course, Mr. Morgan." I wheeled the cart to the dining table overlooking the city skyline, acutely aware of his eyes following me. "Will there be anything else, sir?" "Yes, join me." My carefully constructed professional mask nearly slipped. "I beg your pardon?" "Please, have a seat." He gestured to the chair opposite his. "There's something I'd like to discuss with you." I hesitated. This went against every hotel protocol, but curiosity overrode caution. I sat gingerly on the edge of the chair as he took his seat. "I rarely forget a face, Ms. Reeves," he began, studying me intently. "Yet I couldn't place why you seemed familiar until this morning." He reached for his phone, turning it to show me a web page. It was an old society page photograph from at least 20 years ago. Jonathan and me at a charity gala, both smiling for the camera. I barely recognized the woman I had been, polished and confident in expensive pearls, standing beside the man who would eventually discard me like an outdated accessory. "You were a pianist," he continued, "before you married Jonathan Reeves." I stiffened. "Yes, a lifetime ago. I was researching Reeves after our conversation. His name has come up in connection with some legal matters I'm dealing with." His tone was casual, but his eyes remained sharp. "That's when I found this. Mr. Morgan, I don't understand what this has to do with me serving your breakfast." I tried to sound merely confused rather than defensive. He leaned forward slightly. Last night, you noticed my birthmark. It wasn't a question. I remained silent. The same birthmark you have, he added, nodding toward my wrist where my sleeve had pulled back slightly. My breath caught. I instinctively covered it with my other hand. A crescent moon, he continued. Relatively rare as birthmarks go. I researched it once. Less than 1% of the population has identifiable shaped birthmarks, and crescents are among the least common. Mr. Morgan, you asked my name with unusual interest. You've been watching me since I arrived, and this morning I find that you're the ex-wife of a man whose firm has been trying to secure my business for months. His voice remained calm, but his implication was clear. Why are you interested in me, Ms. Reeves? The moment balanced on a knife's edge. I could retreat into professionalism, apologize for any perceived impropriety, and walk away. The safe choice, the sane choice. Instead, I reached into my pocket and placed the photograph on the table between us. This is why. He picked it up, his expression changing from suspicion to confusion as he studied the grainy hospital image of a newborn infant. I don't understand, he said finally. My son, I said, my voice barely steady. Born prematurely 30 years ago, he lived for only a few hours, or so I was told. I took a deep breath. His name was Ethan. Ethan Jonathan Reeves. His eyes snapped to mine, widening slightly. He had a birthmark, I continued, touching my wrist. Just like yours, just like mine. Morgan set the photograph down carefully, as if it might shatter. What exactly are you suggesting, Ms. Reeves? I don't know, I admitted. It sounds insane, even to me. But the coincidences, I gestured helplessly. The birthmark, the age, the name, even your features. You have my eyes, Jonathan's chin. He stood abruptly, turning to face the window. I was born to Helen and James Morgan. I've seen my birth certificate. This is... He stopped, shaking his head. I understand how this sounds, I said quietly. But before you dismiss it completely, ask yourself why you requested me specifically this morning. Something made you curious, too. His shoulders tensed. He turned back, his expression now carefully controlled. I was adopted, he said finally. My parents told me when I was 16. But my birth certificate still lists Helen as my biological mother. There was never any mention of this scenario you're describing. The admission sent a jolt through me, possibility crystallizing into something more solid. When's your birthday? I asked. April 14th. My heart stopped. My son was born on April 14th, 1995. He sank slowly back into his chair. This is impossible. Yes, I agreed. And yet, we sat in silence, the untouched breakfast cooling between us. Who was your doctor? He finally asked. When you gave birth? Dr. Sarah Winters. She was an obstetrics specialist at University Medical Center. Something flickered across his face. Helen, my mother, was an obstetrician at University Medical. She worked with a Sarah Winters. The room seemed to tilt beneath me. Helen Morgan, I whispered, the name suddenly familiar. I remember her. She was there that night. She came in after they told me my baby didn't make it. He stood again, agitation evident in his movements. This doesn't make sense. Why would my mother... He stopped, correcting himself. Why would Helen and your husband... Jonathan never wanted children, I said, old pain surfacing. When I got pregnant, he was disappointed. When the baby came early, with potential health complications, I couldn't finish the thought. Ethan paced the room, running a hand through his hair. A gesture so like Jonathan's that it sent another shock of recognition through me. I need to verify this, he said finally. All business now. DNA testing, medical records. If what you're suggesting is true, I know, I interrupted, reality crashing down. Mr. Morgan, I didn't come here to disrupt your life. I don't want anything from you. I needed to know. He studied me for a long moment. What exactly did they tell you happened to your baby? That he was too premature, that his lungs weren't developed enough. My voice caught. I held him. He was so small but perfect. They said he died in my arms, but I was heavily medicated. Everything was a blur. Something changed in his expression. A softening, or perhaps recognition of the pain I'd carried for 30 years. I have to go to my meetings, he said finally. But I'm staying another night. We'll talk again this evening. I nodded, gathering myself to leave. Ms. Reeves, Olivia, he added as I reached the door. Don't speak to anyone about this. Not yet. I understood the warning in his tone. I won't. Back in the service elevator, I pressed my forehead against the cool metal wall, breathing deeply. I had just potentially turned this man's life upside down with an impossible claim. And yet, the coincidences were too numerous, too specific to dismiss. If my son hadn't died that night, if Jonathan had somehow arranged this unthinkable deception, the thought that had begun as a whisper now thundered through me. I might have found my child, the child I had grieved for 30 years, the child whose loss had broken something fundamental inside me. And if true, someone would have to answer for 3 decades of lies. The rest of my shift passed in a fog. I moved through my duties mechanically, serving drinks and clearing tables while my mind churned with possibilities. Several times, Diana caught me staring into space and shot me concerned looks. I couldn't blame her. I was barely present, my thoughts orbiting around the penthouse suite and the man who might be my long-lost son. At 2 o'clock, I took my break and slipped away to a quiet corner of the staff room, pulling out my phone with trembling hands. I searched Helen Morgan Obstetrician and found several old articles from medical journals. One included a photograph from 1995, the year my son was born, showing Dr. Helen Morgan receiving an award for excellence in neonatal care. The irony was almost too bitter to bear. I studied her face, a handsome woman with sharp features and intelligent eyes. Nothing in her expression suggested someone capable of participating in the theft of an infant. But then again, what would such a person look like? My break ended too quickly. As I returned to the restaurant floor, I nearly collided with a well-dressed man exiting the elevator. "Excuse me," I murmured, stepping aside. He turned, and recognition hit us both simultaneously. "Olivia?" Jonathan Reeves, my ex-husband, stood before me, looking as shocked as I felt. 20 years of marriage, 5 years of bitter divorce, and now we were strangers occupying the same space. "Jonathan." I managed to keep my voice neutral, though my heart hammered against my ribs. What was he doing here? The coincidence seemed impossible, given my morning's conversation. "I didn't know you worked here." His gaze swept over my uniform, his expression a mixture of pity and discomfort. "There's a lot you don't know about my life now." I straightened, refusing to shrink under his assessment. "Are you staying at the hotel?" "No, just had a meeting." He glanced at his watch, the same ostentatious Rolex he'd worn during our marriage. Some things never changed. "With Ethan Morgan, actually." My blood froze. "Mr. Morgan?" "Yes. Hoping to bring his company on as a client. Big fish." Jonathan's smile was smug. Success had always been his aphrodisiac, though he seemed distracted today. Meeting ended early. I fought to keep my expression neutral. "I should get back to work." "Of course." He hesitated, then added with practiced magnanimity, "You look well, Olivia." Before I could respond, he was walking away, his Italian leather shoes clicking across the marble floor. I watched him go. This man I'd once loved, this man who might have orchestrated the cruelest deception imaginable. Had he just come from meeting with Ethan? Had they discussed business as if they were strangers, while Jonathan knew, had always known, that he was sitting across from his biological son? The thought made me physically ill. I managed to finish my shift without incident, though Diana continued to watch me with concern. As I clocked out, she approached me. "Olivia, is everything all right? You've been off all day." "Just not feeling well," I lied. "Might be coming down with something." "Take care of yourself," she said, genuine concern in her voice. "And if you need to talk." I nodded gratefully and hurried away before she could press further. Outside, evening was falling, the city lights beginning to sparkle against the darkening sky. I checked my phone and found a text from an unknown number. "Meet me at Riverside Park, the Boat Basin Cafe, 1 hour. M." My apartment was only a short subway ride away, giving me just enough time to change out of my uniform before meeting Ethan. I opted for simple clothes, jeans, a blue sweater, minimal makeup. Part of me wanted to look my best, but another part understood that this wasn't a social meeting. This was, what, a reckoning? An investigation? The Boat Basin Cafe was relatively quiet for a weeknight. Ethan sat at a corner table, wearing casual clothes and a baseball cap that partially obscured his face, a far cry from the polished businessman I'd served that morning. A subtle disguise, I realized, to avoid recognition. He stood as I approached, gesturing for me to sit. A bottle of sparkling water and 2 glasses were already on the table. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice low. I thought a neutral location would be better. Did you have your meeting with Jonathan today? I asked without preamble. Surprise flickered across his face. How did you know about that? I ran into him at the hotel. He mentioned meeting with you. Ethan's expression darkened. Yes, it was scheduled weeks ago before all this. I nearly canceled but decided it might be informative. And was it? He has no idea who I am. Ethan's fingers tapped restlessly against his glass. Or if he does, he's an exceptional actor. He spent 30 minutes trying to convince me to hire his firm, talking about his expertise in energy sector regulations. Never a flicker of recognition. That sounds like Jonathan, I said bitterly. Compartmentalizes everything, always focused on the next deal. Ethan studied me intently. Tell me about him. About your marriage. I took a deep breath. We met when I was 21. I was a promising pianist, just starting my career. He was a young attorney with ambition to burn. Charming, brilliant, persuasive. I fell hard. I smiled ruefully. We married quickly. I got pregnant within a year. And he didn't want the baby? Ethan's voice was carefully controlled. He said the timing was wrong. His career was taking off. Children would come later, when we were established. The old pain resurfaced. When I insisted on keeping the pregnancy, he eventually came around, or seemed to. But when complications arose, when the baby came early, what exactly happened that night? Ethan leaned forward, intent. I closed my eyes briefly, forcing myself back to the worst night of my life. I went into labor at 26 weeks. They rushed me to University Medical. Everything was chaotic, terrifying. I remember Jonathan arguing with someone in the hallway while they prepped me for delivery. I took a sip of water, steadying myself. The delivery itself is hazy. They had me heavily sedated. I remember the cry, so small, but definitely a cry. They showed me the baby briefly, this tiny, perfect being. I saw the birthmark then, just like mine. I touched my wrist unconsciously. Then they took him away for treatment. Hours later, Dr. Winters came in with a small bundle, said there had been complications, that you hadn't made it. My voice broke. I held you, him, and said goodbye. They gave me more sedatives after that. I woke up the next day, and it was over. We buried a tiny casket 3 days later. Ethan's face had gone pale. I'm sorry, he said quietly, that you went through that. I need to know, I whispered. Did you find anything today? Anything to confirm or disprove this? He hesitated, then pulled out his phone. I've been researching Helen all day. Found her journals in a box at my childhood home last year after she passed away. I never read them fully until today. He scrolled to a photo of a handwritten page and pushed the phone toward me. The entry was dated April 14th, 1995. The Morgan baby became a reality today. Such a beautiful boy, perfect despite his early arrival. James is overjoyed, already planning fishing trips and baseball games. If only he knew the price of this miracle. Sarah says the mother believes he didn't survive. A necessary deception, for everyone's benefit. The child will have a better life with us than with a father who doesn't want him and a mother too young and traumatized to cope. I tell myself this is an act of mercy, not theft. God forgive me if I'm wrong. My hand flew to my mouth, stifling a sob. The confirmation I'd both hoped for and dreaded. Oh my God, there's more, Ethan said grimly. Years of entries about her guilt, about watching me grow while knowing another woman was grieving my loss. About Jonathan making contributions to her research in exchange for her silence. He paid her. Rage and grief collided inside me. He paid her to steal my child? It seems that way. Ethan's voice was tight with controlled anger. I've already contacted a lab for DNA testing, though after reading this, I have little doubt about the results. I stared at him, truly seeing the features I should have recognized years ago. My eyes, Jonathan's chin, the same widow's peak that my father had. My son, alive, successful, a stranger. What happens now? I asked, my voice barely audible. Now, he said, a cold determination settling over his features. We decide how Jonathan Reeves will pay for what he's done to both of us. The cafe's ambient noise faded around us as we sat in silence, two people connected by blood and severed by betrayal, contemplating the shape of retribution. I don't want revenge, I said finally, surprising myself with the truth of it. I just want to know my son. Something shifted in his expression, a softening perhaps, or recognition. That might be the more difficult path, he said quietly, for both of us. As we sat there, connected by impossible truths and 30 years of lies, I realized that finding him had been the easy part. The real challenge would be finding our way forward from this fractured beginning. 3 days passed in a surreal haze. Ethan checked out of the hotel as scheduled, but rented a private apartment nearby. We agreed to wait for the DNA results before taking any action, though neither of us harbored real doubt about what they would reveal. The truth already lived in the mirrored shape of our birthmarks, in the identical arch of our eyebrows, in the resonance of shared mannerisms we couldn't have learned from each other. I continued my shifts at the Windsor, moving through the motions while my mind remained fixated on the impossible reality unfolding in my life. Diana noticed my distraction, but seemed to attribute it to my encounter with Jonathan. Exes have a way of stirring up old ghosts, she said sympathetically, when she caught me staring into space again. Ghosts. Yes, but this particular ghost had materialized into flesh and blood, disrupting everything I thought I knew about my life. On the 4th day, I received another text from Ethan. Results are in. Meet me at my apartment at 7, address below. The apartment was in a secure building overlooking the park, temporary accommodation that nonetheless exuded the quiet luxury I was coming to associate with Ethan. When he opened the door, I was struck again by the uncanny reflection of my own features in his face. How had I not seen it immediately? How had no one ever commented on our resemblance? Thank you for coming, he said formally, ushering me inside. The space was minimally furnished but comfortable, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a stunning view of the city at dusk. On the coffee table lay an opened envelope. Ethan gestured for me to sit, then handed me the papers inside. 99.99998% probability of maternal relationship, I read aloud, my voice catching. Though I'd been certain, seeing the scientific confirmation rendered me momentarily speechless. There's no doubt, Ethan said, sitting across from me. You are my biological mother, and Jonathan Reeves is my biological father. I set down the papers, overwhelmed by the finality of it. What do you want to do now? I've been thinking about that constantly, he admitted. Part of me wants to confront Jonathan immediately, demand answers, make him face what he's done. His fingers clenched around his water glass. But that would be impulsive, and I don't build billion-dollar companies by being impulsive. The pragmatism in this statement was so reminiscent of Jonathan that it sent a small shock through me. Nature versus nurture playing out in real time. I've compiled everything, Ethan continued, nodding toward his laptop. Helen's journals, the DNA results, hospital records I've managed to obtain. There's enough evidence to pursue criminal charges, conspiracy, fraud, falsification of documents. The statute of limitations might be an issue for some charges, but not all. You want to have him arrested? The thought had never occurred to me. I want him to face consequences, Ethan corrected, whether through legal channels or otherwise. I studied him, this man who was my son, yet not entirely mine. Raised by different parents, shaped by different experiences, yet carrying my DNA, my birthmark, my eyes. What about Helen? I asked quietly. Her role in this? Pain flashed across his face. Helen is gone. She died last year. Pancreatic cancer. He looked away briefly. I can't confront her, can't ask why she participated in this theft, and part of me is grateful for that. Because you loved her, I said, understanding immediately. Because despite everything, she was your mother. Yes. His voice was rough with emotion. She raised me, loved me, was proud of me. Everything I've accomplished, I owe partly to her and James. He met my gaze directly. I've spent days reconciling those truths with what I now know she did to you. The complexity of his position struck me forcefully. While I had lost a child, he had gained a history he never knew existed. His foundation had been shaken just as profoundly as mine. What about Sarah Winters? I asked. She's still alive. She was directly involved. I've located her, Ethan said. She's in an assisted living facility upstate, early-stage Alzheimer's. Her lucidity varies day to day. I want to see her, I said immediately, surprising myself with the certainty. I need to hear from her directly why she participated in this. Ethan nodded slowly. I've already arranged it. We can drive up tomorrow, if you're willing. The decisiveness of his actions reminded me again of Jonathan, the efficiency, the strategic thinking. But there was a consideration in his manner that his father had always lacked. I wondered if that came from Helen, or if it was uniquely his own. There's something else, he said, reaching for a folder on the side table. While investigating, I discovered some disturbing information about Jonathan's current activities. He spread several documents before me: financial statements, emails, legal briefs. His firm has been engaging in questionable practices for years, helping clients evade environmental regulations, burying evidence in class action lawsuits, facilitating offshore tax schemes that skirt legality. That sounds like Jonathan, I said bitterly. Ethics were always flexible when money was involved. These documents could destroy his career, Ethan said evenly. His firm is currently bidding for several major contracts, including one with my company. I've been delaying my decision, using it as a reason to meet with him again next week. I understood then the shape of his strategy. You're going to confront him. We are, he corrected. If you're willing, I believe we deserve answers face to face. The thought of confronting Jonathan sent a cold shiver through me. The man had demolished me twice, first by orchestrating the death of our child, then through our vicious divorce years later. I'd spent 5 years avoiding him, rebuilding a modest life from the ashes he'd left me in. I don't know if I'm strong enough, I admitted. You survived believing your child was dead for 30 years, Ethan said quietly. You survived losing everything in your divorce. You rebuilt your life working in a hotel where you serve people who used to be your peers. That doesn't sound like weakness to me. His assessment, so direct, so perceptive, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I'd grown accustomed to being invisible, to having my strength go unrecognized. To hear it acknowledged by this man who was my son felt like a validation I hadn't realized I desperately needed. When I started investigating this, Ethan continued, I expected to feel only anger toward Jonathan, and I do feel that, but I've also found myself increasingly angry on your behalf. His gaze was intense, determined. What he did to me was unconscionable. What he did to you was cruel, beyond measure. I nodded, unable to speak past the knot in my throat. We'll take this at your pace, he assured me. But I think confronting Jonathan together is the only way we both get closure. Together, I repeated softly, testing the word. For 30 years I'd faced every challenge alone. The concept of having an ally, especially one connected to me by blood, felt foreign, yet deeply right. Tomorrow we'll see Sarah Winters, I decided, finding my resolve. And then we'll plan how to face Jonathan. Ethan nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. As the city lights sparkled into life outside his windows, we began to outline our approach, mother and son united by blood and betrayal, plotting the reckoning that was 30 years overdue. Later, as I prepared to leave, Ethan hesitated at the door. I've wondered something, he said. If you had known I was alive all these years, how would my life have been different? The question, so vulnerable, so fundamental, caught me off guard. I would have raised you with music, I said finally, the truth rising unbidden. I would have loved you imperfectly but completely. I would have taught you that your worth isn't measured by achievements or possessions. I paused, emotion threatening to overwhelm me. But I can't say your life would have been better, only different. He absorbed this, nodding slowly. Thank you for your honesty. As I stepped into the hallway, the weight of 3 decades of grief and the tentative possibility of healing followed me like twin shadows into the night. The assisted living facility was nestled in the Hudson Valley, surrounded by autumn foliage ablaze in red and gold. Ethan drove us there in a modest sedan rather than the luxury car I had expected. Less conspicuous, he explained. We spoke little during the 2-hour journey, each lost in our own thoughts about the confrontation ahead. I studied him covertly as he drove, noting how he held the wheel at precisely 10 and 2, how he checked his mirrors at regular intervals, methodical, precise. Was this learned behavior or something inherited from Jonathan, who had the same exacting nature? The question of nature versus nurture had never felt so immediate, so personal. The facility director says she's having a good day, Ethan said as we pulled into the parking lot. Relatively lucid. That can change quickly, though. I nodded, suddenly nervous. What have you told her about why we're visiting? Nothing specific, just that we have questions about a case from her past. He turned to face me. Are you ready for this? No, I wasn't ready. How could anyone be ready to face the woman who had helped steal their child? But I nodded anyway. The facility was bright and well maintained, smelling of disinfectant and artificial flowers. A staff member led us to a sunroom where a thin, white-haired woman sat gazing out at the gardens. Dr. Sarah Winters had aged dramatically from the competent physician I remembered, her once sharp features now sunken, her hands trembling slightly as they rested in her lap. "Dr. Winters," the attendant said gently, "your visitors are here." She turned, her faded blue eyes taking us in with mild curiosity. "Hello," she said, her voice surprisingly strong. "Do I know you?" Ethan took the lead, sitting in a chair across from her. "My name is Ethan Morgan. This is Olivia Reeves. We wanted to ask you about something that happened at University Medical Center in 1995. Her expression remained pleasant, but vacant. "I worked there for many years. So many babies delivered. So many mothers." She smiled vaguely. "All blurs together now." I moved closer, my heart pounding. "Dr. Winters, do you remember Olivia Reeves? I delivered a premature baby boy in April 1995. You told me he died." Something flickered in her eyes, recognition, then quickly masked alarm. "I'm sorry for your loss, dear. It happens with premature infants, despite our best efforts." "Except he didn't die," I said, my voice low but steady. "He's sitting right here beside me." Sarah's gaze darted to Ethan, then back to me, her composure cracking slightly. I'm not sure what you're talking about." Ethan leaned forward, deliberately pushing back his sleeve to reveal the crescent birthmark on his wrist. "I think you do, Dr. Winters. I think you remember this birthmark. I think you remember helping Dr. Helen Morgan take me from my biological mother and falsifying death records." The color drained from her face. Her hands began to tremble more violently. "Helen," she whispered. "Is she passed away last year," Ethan said. "But she left journals, detailed journals." Sarah closed her eyes briefly, as if in pain. When she opened them again, the vague pleasantness was gone, replaced by a sharp clarity. "You have to understand," she said, her voice suddenly stronger. "It wasn't a simple case of theft." "Then explain it to me," I challenged, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Explain why you told me my baby was dead when he wasn't." Sarah's gaze shifted between us, calculating. Finally she sighed. "Your husband approached me first," she said, addressing me. "Weeks before the delivery. He knew the pregnancy was high risk, said he was exploring options." "Options?" The word tasted bitter. "He didn't want a child with potential disabilities," she said bluntly. "The earlier the birth, the higher the risk of complications. He asked what might happen if the child was born with significant problems." Nausea rose in my throat. "And you told him what?" I explained the potential complications of extreme prematurity, but I also told him that many premature infants develop normally with proper care. Her expression hardened. "That's when he mentioned Helen. Said she'd recently lost a pregnancy and was desperate for a child. Suggested an arrangement that would benefit everyone." "Benefit everyone?" Ethan repeated incredulously. "You mean benefit him and the Morgans?" Sarah had the grace to look ashamed. He was very persuasive, talked about how the child would have advantages with the Morgans that he couldn't provide. How Olivia was too young, too focused on her music career to properly care for a potentially special needs child. "That wasn't his decision to make," I said, fury building inside me. "And it certainly wasn't yours." "No, it wasn't," she agreed softly. "But you have to understand my position. Jonathan Reeves knew about a case I had mishandled years earlier, a mistake that could have ended my career. He made it clear that if I didn't cooperate, he would ensure I never practiced medicine again." "So you chose your career over my child," I said, the words like glass in my throat. "I chose what seemed like the best solution for everyone at the time," she countered weakly. "The baby would go to parents who desperately wanted him. You would be spared the potential heartache of raising a disabled child. And yes, I would keep my career." "Except the baby wasn't disabled," Ethan interjected. "I was perfectly healthy despite being premature." Sarah nodded slowly. "We knew that within hours of your birth. But by then, the plan was already in motion. The Morgans had falsified documents ready, claiming Helen had given birth while traveling. Jonathan had already told Olivia you hadn't survived." Her gaze shifted to me. "You were so heavily sedated, so distraught. The small bundle you held, it wasn't your son." The memory of that small, still form in my arms, the child I had grieved for 30 years, shattered like glass. "What did I hold?" I whispered. "A stillborn from earlier that day," she admitted, unable to meet my eyes. "The parents had chosen not to see their baby. We repurposed it." I stood abruptly, needing distance, needing air. The casual cruelty of it all, the calculated deception, the manipulation of my grief, threatened to overwhelm me. I walked to the window, pressing my forehead against the cool glass, fighting for composure. Behind me, Ethan continued the questioning. Did the Morgans know about Jonathan's coercion? Did they know you were being blackmailed into this arrangement? Helen knew something wasn't right, Sarah admitted, but she convinced herself it was for the best. James, I don't think he ever knew the full truth. He believed the adoption was legitimate, if unorthodox. And the payments? Ethan pressed. Helen's journals mentioned contributions to her research. Sarah's face tightened. Jonathan paid handsomely for everyone's silence. Regular donations to Helen's neonatal research unit. A cabin in the Adirondacks for me. Her voice cracked with shame. I've had 30 years to regret accepting it. I turned back from the window, composed enough now to face her. Did you ever consider telling me the truth? All those years, knowing what you'd done? She met my gaze directly for the first time. Once, about a year after I saw you at a fundraiser. You looked haunted. I almost approached you then. But Jonathan was at your side, watching everything, everyone. I knew what he was capable of. You were afraid of him, I realized. Yes, her admission was barely audible. He made it clear that if the truth ever came out, he would destroy not just my career, but my life. And I believed him. Well, now the truth is out, Ethan said, his voice hard. And someone will face consequences. Fear flashed across Sarah's face. What are you going to do? We haven't decided yet, I said, finding strength in the plural pronoun. But Jonathan will answer for what he's done. Sarah nodded slowly, resignation evident in her posture. I deserve whatever comes. I've lived with this guilt for 30 years, watching my memories slip away while this one remains crystal clear. Her roomy eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, Olivia, for everything we took from you. As we left her sitting in the sunroom, small and diminished in the autumn light, I felt no satisfaction, no closure, only a profound sadness for the irretrievable years lost to all of us through one